If you had told me 2 years ago that I'd be living in the Philippines, engaged to the woman I love, and preparing to become a father, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't want those things, because I honestly didn't think they were ever going to happen. 2 years ago, I was living what most people would call a normal life. I had a job, I paid my bills, I went to work every day, I came home every night, and on the surface, everything looked fine. But there was one thing missing. I was alone. Now, don't get me wrong. I wasn't sitting around feeling sorry for myself every day. I had family, I had friends, I had hobbies. Life wasn't terrible, but there comes a point where you start wondering if this is all there is. You start wondering if you're ever going to find someone to share your life with. Dating wasn't easy for me. I was never the guy women noticed when he walked into a room. I wasn't the most attractive guy. I carried a little extra weight. I was shy. And after enough disappointing dates and conversations that went nowhere, I slowly stopped expecting much. The older I got, the more I started accepting that maybe some people just end up alone. Then one day, something unexpected happened. I started watching videos about the Philippines. At first, it was just curiosity. I liked learning about different places, different cultures, different ways of life, but the more I watched, the more interested I became. The people seemed friendly. Family seemed important. Life looked simpler, and for whatever reason, I couldn't stop watching. That eventually led me to meeting someone online, a Filipina. At first, it was just a conversation, then another conversation, then another, and before I knew it, we were talking every day. The funny thing is, what attracted me to her wasn't what most people would assume. Yes, she was beautiful, but it was the way she treated me that got my attention. She listened. She asked questions. She wanted to know about my life, my family, my dreams, my fears. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like somebody genuinely cared about who I was. Not what I owned, not what I earned, not what I could provide, just me. As our relationship grew, I started thinking about something I never thought I'd seriously consider. What if I actually moved to the Philippines? That's when the criticism started. Some friends thought I was crazy. Some family members thought I was making a mistake. A few people were convinced I was being scammed. They told me she only wanted a green card. They told me she only wanted money. They told me I was being naive. And when I shared parts of my story online, complete strangers had opinions too. Lots of them. Some said I couldn't find a woman in America. Others said I was only interested in younger women. Some were absolutely convinced the relationship would fail. The strange thing was that almost none of those people had ever spoken to her. They had never seen us together. They had never watched us laugh together. They had never spent hours talking with her the way I had. Yet somehow they were completely certain they knew how my story would end. For a while I listened. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was making a huge mistake. Maybe I was chasing a fantasy, but deep down, I knew something they didn't. I knew how I felt when I talked to her. I knew how happy she made me. And eventually I reached a point where I had a choice. Stay where I was. Keep living the same life. Keep wondering, what if? Or take the biggest risk I had ever taken. I chose the risk. I sold things. I packed my life into a few suitcases. I booked a one-way flight, and I got on a plane. I still remember sitting there before takeoff wondering if everyone else was right, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. What I didn't know at the time was that flight would change everything, because when I arrived in the Philippines and finally started building a life with her, something happened. I felt at home. Now let me be clear. The Philippines isn't perfect. There are challenges, culture shock, visa paperwork, power outages, internet issues, days when absolutely nothing seems to go according to plan. But every time life got difficult, she was still there, And that made all the difference. Today, as I sit here telling this story, it's been over a year since I made that move. We're still together. We're still deeply in love, and we're preparing to welcome our first child into the world. The woman people warned me about is now part of my family. The same family members who once had doubts have spent time getting to know her. They've talked with her, laughed with her, built relationships with her, and now they're excited to meet the baby. Some of them are even planning a trip to come visit us here in the Philippines. Life has a funny way of surprising you. Sometimes the older I got, the more I started accepting that maybe this was just how life was going to be. Work, bills, the occasional weekend with friends, then back to work again. There wasn't anything wrong with my life, but there wasn't anything exciting about it either. I wasn't chasing some dream. I wasn't planning to move across the world. Honestly, I thought my future was already written. Then one evening, I found myself watching videos online about life in the Philippines. At first, it was simple curiosity. I had never been there. I didn't know much about it. But the more I watched, the more interested I became. The people seemed happy. Families spent time together. Life looked slower, simpler. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I couldn't stop watching. That curiosity eventually led to conversations with people who lived there. Then one conversation changed everything. Her. At first, she was just another person on the other side of a screen, a stranger living thousands of miles away. But the more we talked, the more I realized she was different. She wasn't interested in what I owned. She wasn't impressed by money. She didn't ask me for favors. She simply wanted to know who I was. We talked about everything: family, life, dreams, the mistakes we'd made, the things we still hope to do someday. Hours would pass without either of us noticing. For the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to hearing my phone ring, and somewhere along the way, something happened that I never expected. I fell in love. Not with an idea, not with a fantasy, with a real person, a person who made me feel valued, a person who made me laugh, a person who somehow made the future feel exciting again. The problem was that not everyone saw it the way I did. The moment I started telling people about her, the warnings began. Friends thought I was making a mistake. Family members questioned everything. Some people were convinced I was being scammed. Others told me I was crazy for even considering moving overseas. Then came the internet. If you've ever shared a relationship online, you already know what happened next. People who had never met me suddenly became experts on my life. They said she only wanted a green card. They said she was using me. They said I was too old, too naive, too desperate. Some even claimed I was only moving because I couldn't find love in America. The strange thing was that none of those people actually knew us. They had never sat through one of our conversations. They had never seen the way she smiled when we talked. They had never watched us build a relationship one day at a time, but that didn't stop them from judging it. For a while, their words got into my head. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was making a mistake. Maybe I was risking everything for something that wasn't real. But every time doubt started creeping in, I went back to one simple question. What if they are wrong? And what if I spend the rest of my life wondering what could have happened if I never took the chance? That question stayed with me for months. Eventually, I knew I had to make a decision. Keep living the life I already knew, or take the biggest leap of faith I'd ever taken. I chose the leap. The day I booked that flight felt surreal. For months, moving to the Philippines had been something I talked about, something I dreamed about, something I imagined. Now it was actually happening. As the departure date got closer, the doubts got louder. Not from her, from everyone else. People kept reminding me of everything that could go wrong. What if she wasn't who she said she was? What if I hated living there? What if I ran out of money? What if I regretted leaving everything behind? Those questions followed me all the way to the airport. I still remember sitting at my gate staring out the window at the plane that would carry me halfway around the world. I was excited, terrified, hopeful, and completely unsure of what was waiting for me on the other side. But I knew one thing. If I turned around and went home, I would regret it for the rest of my life. So I got on the plane. When I landed in the Philippines, I wasn't thinking about visas. I wasn't thinking about money. I wasn't thinking about what strangers on the internet had said. I was thinking about seeing her. Finally, after all the phone calls, all the video chats, all the months of waiting, she was standing there. And the moment I saw her, every mile suddenly felt worth it. The truth is, moving to the Philippines wasn't some magical fairy tale. Real life doesn't work that way. There were challenges, cultural differences, language differences, days when things didn't go according to plan, days when I questioned myself, days when I wondered if I was strong enough to build a completely new life so far from home. But there was one thing that never changed: us. The more time we spent together, the more certain I became that I had made the right decision. The relationship everyone warned me about turned out to be the most genuine relationship I'd ever experienced. The woman people claimed was using me never asked me for anything except honesty. The woman people said couldn't possibly love me became the person who supported me through every challenge, and slowly, something unexpected started happening. The same family members who once questioned everything began getting to know her. Phone calls became conversations. Conversations became friendships. The walls started coming down. Instead of asking why I moved, they started understanding why I stayed. They saw the same thing I had seen from the beginning: a good woman, a loving partner, someone who genuinely cared about me. Today, more than a year later, we're still together. We're still building our life. And now we're preparing for the biggest adventure either of us has ever experienced. We're expecting our first child. Sometimes I sit back and think about how close I came to missing all of this. How easy it would have been to listen to the fear. How easy it would have been to let other people make the decision for me. If I had listened to every warning, every criticism, every negative comment, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have this home. I wouldn't have this relationship. And I certainly wouldn't be getting ready to become a father. The funny thing is, many of the people who once doubted us are now excited for us. My family has welcomed her into their lives. They're excited about the baby. They're making plans to come visit. The same story they once thought would end badly has become something they celebrate. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. Sometimes the people around you aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect you. But they're making decisions based on their fears, not your future. At some point, every person has to decide whether they're going to live the life other people think is safe or the life they believe is right. For me, that decision led to the Philippines. It led to love, it led to family, and it led to a future I never thought I'd have. Looking back now, I don't regret taking that leap. My only regret would have been never taking it at all.